So thank you, Edgar. Again, I have some questions, so feel free to answer wherever you want. I will start to ask you, uh, how about Edgar Keret before October 7 and Edgar Keret after October 7? What had changed not only in your daily life, but also in your vision of Israel's future?
So, if I talk about my personal perspective, I can say that the first thing that comes to mind that changed in me is my attitude toward stories. Because I think that before the 7th of October, there was something, I saw in my story something very precious. Like they were very important, and there was something that was very private and in my own term. And in the war, I found myself, for example, a woman asked me to write a story for her husband who's in the army, and asked her to write her a story about a crocodile. So she writes to me on Instagram, I have a 3-month-old baby. She cries all the time. I don't know how to write. Please write a story about a crocodile. Or these soldiers that lost a leg in the war, he asked me to write a story with him together in WhatsApp, that I write a paragraph, he writes a paragraph. And I never write like this, but suddenly you feel that there is something about your stories that you don't only write them to be beautiful, but that it's like, I don't know, if you have a beautiful shirt and somebody is bleeding and you block the bleeding with the shirt, then you don't care about the stains, you're somewhere else. So I feel that the role of art in my life really changed, and it became something much more tangible and feasible as a mean of some kind of emotional survival. That it's less important if I write a good story, but if I don't write, I go crazy. When I look at my country, I must say that as somebody who was very critical against this government and who demonstrated against it regularly every week, then some of the things didn't and still don't surprise me. But in essence, before 7th of October, I was much more worried from the internal situation in Israel than from Iran. And today I feel the same. I feel that the greatest threat to Israel is some of the Israeli people. It's in the history of the Jewish people, there were 2 temples. Both of them were ruined because of a civil war between Jews, among Jews. So I'm saying that I really feel that the crucial war for the future of Israel is not only against Hezbollah or Iran, but it's also against the forces that want to make Israel a messianic, religious, fundamentalistic state. If you listen carefully to the speeches of Nasrallah, when he speaks about the destruction of Israel, he doesn't speak about Hezbollah destroying Israel. Nasrallah is very intelligent, and he knows that Hezbollah cannot destroy Israel. But what he talks about making Israel an unlivable country, making Israel a country from which all the intellectual liberal, all the academics, all the writers, all the high-tech guy, everybody will escape. So it will become some kind of a Yemen, a place that is torn to pieces, violent, not democratic, and not attractive to the Western world, doesn't have pacts with those countries. So on this path, I really feel that the seeds were there and that the enemies of Israel knew how to exploit them and to make the rift in the Israeli society even greater.
Okay, I understand you. Yeah. I want to ask you, in your books, personal and collective memory are central to understanding the Jewish and Israeli culture. Tell us about this relationship in your books and your work, and how it manifests itself when you are writing, the personal and collective memory relationship.
What I think is that as a writer, I only tell my personal story.
Yeah, of course.
And my personal story has implication for the collective because it presents another option. You know, one of the most memorized stories or moments in my life is when I was a child. My mother was a Holocaust survivor. She was a child during the war. And when I was a kid, she was 40 something. And she took me to a child doctor, a children doctor.
Yeah.
And at the waiting rooms, there were only two chairs. And I come from a town, like, you know, a small, very small city, so people know each other. And my town, most of the people are from Iraqi descent. So when we came to the waiting room, the mother elbowed her son and said, "Give her a seat, your seat. She's a Holocaust survivor." And the child got up and he says to my mother, "Ma'am, please take my seat." And my mother said to him, "Thank you, you're very kind. Can you tell me why you want to give me your seat?" And he said, "Because you're a Holocaust survivor." And she said, "Do you want to tell me what does it mean that I'm a Holocaust survivor?" And he says, "It means that you're miserable and poor and that you suffered through many things in your life." So my mother said, "I want to offer you another explanation. The fact that I'm a Holocaust survivor means that if me, you, and your mother would stand here for hours with no water and no food, you probably fall down first. So if I were you, I would hang tight to my seat because you may need it." Now, when she said that, I saw in my eyes the power of storytelling. That through the ability to tell her story herself, she gained the ability to stop being a victim. And I think that when I tell my stories, I don't want to tell the story of the nation. I must say, this is a sad story which no one should want to tell. But when I tell I tell a story of somebody who experienced an era in history and who tries to survive it. And, you know, I have a new book out here in Israel called Autocorrect. And when they tell me what is this book about, is I say it's a instruction book about how to stay a little human, even in very difficult times. You know, and I feel that for me, this is really the mission, to cling to humanity and to be in a strange way some kind of a, you know, you have presenters of Adidas or Nike, or so to be some kind of a presenter of humanity, to show people around me that you can be confused, that you can change your mind, that you can be angry and then apologize, to do all those kind of things that it's almost like proficiencies that many people around me in this post-trauma of the conflict had lost. You know, it's really the phenomena of selective empathy is all around me. People keep their tears only for some people and don't have them for anybody else. And, you know, I think this is an international phenomena of all this kind of identity culture and social media binarity. But in the bottom line, if there's anything that I can offer the world, it's obscurity. I think we need more obscurity. You know, things are too sharp clear right now.
Yeah, good answer. Let's talk in that way a little bit about the Israeli literature. As you know, in the diaspora, we used to read Israeli Jewish writers like Amos Oz, David Grossman, Batiagur, and yourself. But there is also a lot of unknown Israeli literature, both by Jewish, but especially about not-Jewish Israeli author. Who comes to your mind to talk about this different literature beyond yourself, Oz, Grossman, Gur, etc.?
Well, I must say that, that the first writer that comes to mind is a friend, and it's Saed Kashua. And Saed Kashua is a Palestinian or Israeli Arab writer who currently lives in the US. And what I really like about his books is that they do not try to show a political position, but that they tell a human story. And I always feel that this is the best way to present a political position. It's really, I think that sometimes some things can be justified, but it's more powerful from agreeing to something, to experience that thing. It's more powerful from understanding shame or pain than experiencing that shame and pain. And I think that side really shows very well the identity of the Israeli Palestinian, the ones that is suspected as a traitor by Israelis and condescended and suffers discrimination, and on the other one that does not fit in the Palestinian society and that is criticized by Palestinian societies for being a collaborator. I think that, in our world, the position of being a bridge between two worldviews is both now a holy and impossible task.
In that way, some non-Jewish Israeli woman writer?
I must say that I know some, but I can't say that there is one that is a direct source of influence for me, or I can't think of anyone. And I must say that part of it comes from ignorance, because most of the Arab writers, even the Israeli Arab writers, are not translated to Hebrew. The thing with Saed, what's unusual about Saed, that he writes in Hebrew, even though he's a Palestinian.
Great. Yeah, as you say, it's important because people like yourself are a bridge, and we need a lot of bridges right now. So,
perfect. For sure. I must say that the fact that I know so very little about local culture, it's nothing that I'm proud of, and it's only a proof of how the words that were more integrated in the past are now totally separate.
That's a good point. We see, Etgar, maybe in the diaspora more obviously, we see a resurgence of anti-Semitism, often disguised as anti-Zionism. How do you see this anti-Semitism affecting Jewish communities around the world, being Jew in Israel? What are the returning tropes, and what is original about modern anti-Semitism?
What I want to say is that I think that, as I said, my position is to obscure things a little. And I want to say that anti-Semitism exists, and even more so now these days. But at the same time, a criticism of Zionism exists, and they are not the same. And one should understand that you cannot use this term anti-Semitism too broadly, so it can prevent criticism against Israel. I think that a lot of the internet dialogue is fake and shallow and is incitive. And this is something that is true for all phenomena, not only for Jewish issues. And I'm saying that, first of all, anti-Semitism existed and exists. But in a world of hatred, it's easier for it to be spread and to exist, and even also to be able to hide in plain sight, because all the atmosphere is more violent. And in the same time, we live in a period where it's more and more legitimate criticism exists against Israel. You know, I think that the things that the Israeli government does do not necessarily project on Zionism or on the country of Israel, or for certain on people of Jewish identity, and anyone doing so really is an anti-Semite. But I'm saying at the same time that it is a time where me, as an Israeli and a Jew, have to hear more criticism about my country. And sadly, I agree with some of that criticism. I really feel that my problem nowadays is less, I can live with most opinions, not with anti-Semitism, but with most opinions. What I can't live is with the way, let's say, argument is being engaged these days. Because, you know, it's really, I can tell you, I'm a person who had taken part in many debates. And I can tell you that whenever I would go on a debate, I would have this very primal fear that the person I have an argument with will convince me. And sometimes it happened. And the fear that I had was not even a rational fear. I just didn't want to lose, you know. But I knew that I could lose. I tell you honestly, when I debate these days, and I hardly debate, I have no fear whatsoever, because I know that there will be someone shouting at me and saying manipulative, untrue stuff, and that it will be more like a fight, a street fight, than some kind of an attempt to exchange information and to find a clearer view of the truth, you know. And I'm saying that fundamentally, I think that anti-Semitism is riding this horse, you know, in a world where, let's say, identity, let's say, in a weird sense, a movement like Me Too, or I don't know, Black Lives Matters, in a weird sense, they've indirectly made it an easier atmosphere for anti-Semitism. Why? Because in Me Too and in Black Lives Matter, for very positive reason, you talk about identity and you treat people, you know, according to their identity. And once this is a practice, then it's a practice that can be done also in a negative way, you know. So I'm saying the moment that I think that whatever situation you see in the world, the way that I see it, because I'm an old timer, you see I have white hair, is that it's made out of two things: what's going on and the context. Now, in my generation, what's going on was the most important thing. If I see somebody beheading a body, that's something that first and foremost I react to, and I say, the guy who beheads this body is not my friend. The context is, this guy's parents died, okay, important. But I'm saying first and foremost, it's important what's going on. And I think that we are living in an age where identity precedes actions. You know, when somebody says, I believe every woman, then he's doing women's a wrong service, because some women lie, and some Jews lie, and some Black people lie. And the idea is that when you say something that is supposed to be in my support, but it's untrue, you're not helping me. Yeah. You know, and I feel that in this kind of a very heated, hated, superficial age of discourse, then anti-Semitism is basically, it's natural, you know, it's on every menu, because even when you're not anti-Semitic, you know, the same ingredients that make anti-Semitism, which is basically blind hatred and generalization and ignoring facts. It's something that is exercised regularly on the internet. You know, not only against Jews, but basically almost against anyone who's there. You could be a vaccine supporter or a vaccine objector. You know, it doesn't matter. The moment that you identify as something, then you know, then the opinion is made, and you have very little chance of changing it.
Yeah, good answer. I like it. There have always been Israeli voices critical of the different governments, voices against the occupation of the territories and the abuses against the Palestinian population have always been present in Israel. How can we continue to be critical of specific policies of the Israeli government without contributing to the rise of anti-Semitism? This is a very important question for us in the diaspora, because as you say, when we start to talk with the other, with the non-Jewish, we want to be critical of Israel, but sometimes our argument invites the other to start to validate the anti-Semitism ideas. That for us is important, this question.
Yeah, but I think that the truth is always helpful, you know, because when you say the truth, even if it's not in your interests, then you basically reinforce the fact that you are there to talk about reality and not there to support a camp. You know, I once wrote an op-ed for the New York Times about how I hate the term pro-Israeli. Because I say, when somebody says to me, I'm pro-Israeli, pro-Palestinian, it means like an honest disclosure, like a warning. It's like I'm saying in advance that nothing that you say will change your mind. Don't waste your time. I'm not listening already, you know? So I really feel that you know, that my identity is Jewish and Israeli, but first and foremost, my identity is human. And as a human being, the values that I uphold are crucial. Now, I think that many times the arguments that are being taken right now, you cannot win them. It's not that you speak to somebody and you say to them, you say, this is genocide in Gaza, all Israelis are Nazis. And you say, no, I'm going to shout at you very nicely. And in 10 minutes, you're going to pray Shema Israel and sing a tikva, you know? It's not going to happen. But I feel that what you can do in such an argument is basically deconstruct the false way of argumentation. You know, it's really, I think that, you know, I tell you a story. I once met a Palestinian in the US, and we became friends. And this Palestinian, he said to me, you know, I told him my mother is a Holocaust survivor. And he said, you know, I really think that the Holocaust was a huge trauma. And he said, it's a shame that Jews insist on exaggerating it, because everybody knows that only 60,000 dies and not 6 million. But the fact that you blow up the number, you are shooting yourself in the foot, because 60,000 is also a lot. And I told him, you know, it's really 6 million. And I showed him and we talked about it. And I feel that the fact that he listened to me and understood that his facts were wrong came from the fact that he knew that first and foremost, I will always tell him the truth. That I will not use a propaganda just because it's in my favor. And I think that we talked about bridge, that there is something about a dialogue even an argument that it should be done by some special rules. And the rule is that we engage in it, to understand the word better, not to change our mind. And if you can give information that will change the word better, then sometimes even if you say something that is a little against Israel or even against the Israeli government, what it does, it's not necessarily make somebody who hates Israel hate it more, but somebody who hates Israel see that the reality is more complex than he had seen it before. I think that, we, because of social media and technology, we keep moving on this binary scale of for and against, good and bad. But life is mostly a mixture of things. And in that sense, I think that the truth always has more good ingredients than bad ingredients in it. And I want to tell you something about the identity of being a Jew in the diaspora. A long time ago, I went to the US and I met there a young Jewish American. And he said, I have criticism about the government of Israel, but I don't have the legitimation to express them. And I say to him, why? And he said, because I didn't go to the army. My children don't go to the army. I don't live under bombs. So I can't tell those people anything. And I said to him, look, imagine that you have a family member that you really like. And this family member becomes a junkie. And you say, oh, I'm not in a position to tell him, because I say what you're doing is a very narcissistic act, because if you don't think about yourself, if somebody that you like is doing something wrong, you should say, no, don't cut the watermelon like this, you're gonna hurt yourself. Don't climb the ladder, don't put the electric cord when your feet are wet. Your dog just crapped on the carpet. This is what you do with a friend. The embarrassment is when you're selfish, when you think about yourself. And I think that any person who's engaged in the issues of Israel and wants Israel to be a good place to live in, helps Israel by doing so. It's not only waving flags, it's also saying, I care, I think, I tell you the truth. When I write a bad story, my wife tells me this story is no good. That's why I like her. I don't want her to say, oh, but this and this, so I have no legitimation to criticize the stories,
Yeah, I agree with you. We have two more questions, Edgar.
Of course.
The Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which is complex, involves anti-Semitism that entangles Palestinians and Israel. The Palestinians, because they believe that the problem will be solved by throwing the Jews to the sea. To the Israelis, because they believe that any compromise with those with genocidal aspiration is impossible. As the years go by and the violence makes the possibility of a political solution more remote, in your opinion, there is a way out of the trap that the anti-Semitism, as you say before, has set for Zionism?
Well, I must say that, again, titles and identities are things that can always be inflicted. I can talk to American college professor who are really anti-Semitic in their opinion, and they do not refer to Jews, but they talk about colonialists here in the Middle East or things like this. So I don't think it's a specifically a anti-Semitic problem. I think that, for example, our enmity with many Palestinians, it's not about the ground that we're specifically Jews, but that we are infidels. And that if we were Christians, it would have been the same problem. I think that the natural problem of the conflict is the essence of the conflict is basically two fundamentalistic religious opinions saying that God granted the country to one group and excluded the other. You know, my sister is religious, and I once said to her, do you think Palestinians should live in Israel? And she said, it's not my country. And I said, but what about God? She said, God allowed me to live in it, but it's his country. And sadly, there are people like Ben-Gvir that don't think like that. And they think that the country only belongs to them. And that them, very much like Muslim fundamentalists, believe that they are on the right side or even the righteous side. And that there is no place for any compromise or truth that is not their own. So I really feel that in its essence, the conflict is less territorial or nationalistic and more religious. And you know, when the people of Hamas attacked on 7th of October, they basically, the vision was not a Palestinian state, but a Muslim state that will go all the way up to Lebanon, you know? So I'm saying it's really, it's not something, I think that sometimes the perspective thinks that it's wrong because, you know, even when you look at the 7th of October and the timing of it, you can't ignore the fact that the US were just pressurizing Israel to sign a deal to be together with the Saudi, you know, basically building an axis against Iran. So the war, first and foremost, closed that option. So I think that sometimes this is seen as a local territorial conflict, but it's basically a global fundamentalistic religious conflict. You know, it is not coincidence that people from Yemen who Israel never had any conflict with Yemen, you know, it had thousands of kilometers between them. They are swearing that they will sacrifice their life to liberate Palestine. You know, Shia are helping Sunni. You know, what you see here is it's not a group of people fighting for their independence. It's a narrative that is much more complex than that.
Yeah,
and I'm saying, given that, I think that what should win should be the idea of a Palestinian state, which is one that I always fought for. But I think that it should be a Palestinian state and not a huge Islamic state.
Yeah.
Which excludes the existence of Israel.
Yeah, I agree. Perfect. The last question. We read a lot of interviews that you gave to Spanish media. And you say in some interview that, and I quote you, nothing in common unite Israelis. Are you suggesting that it is impossible to create a common sense of belonging in Israel? Aren't the various Jewish and non-Jewish communities in fact united by the fact that they speak Hebrew and share some cultural trends and the future of the country? Isn't it wonderful that Arabs know more about Jewish culture than many diasporic Jews? Isn't it also wonderful that Israeli Jews know a lot about Islam and Islamic culture?
Well, again, you know, I think that when I talk about the inability to coexist in one country, you know, or the difficulty in it, I think that what I refer to the most is the rift, again, between, I would say, Messianic, fundamentalistic, racist Judaism, and what I would say either secular people or moderate religious people. And this doesn't matter if they're Jews or Muslims. In Israel, there are many Israeli Arabs that I see great connection to. You know, we read the same books, we have the same history, we hold the same opinion about equality or rights for women, you know. And so the rift is for me, more between the extreme religious people in Israel, who for the first time are part of the government, and the other people, because essentially they always say about Israel that it's a democratic Jewish state. And the fundamental argument is it a democratic Jewish state, or is it a Jewish democratic state? And people like me say this is a democratic state and the people in it are Jewish. But they say no, this is a Jewish religious state and we are now also a democracy. But any conflict between religion and democracy, then religion wins. Now, when you believe in liberalism and equality to all races, and when you are not a misogyn, then even if there are some kind of religious traits that I respect the fact that they are being kept. You know, my sister, she's an ultra-Orthodox and she lives by rules. I wouldn't want those rules to be in the public space. You know, my sister doesn't work, but this doesn't mean that I want to live in a country which will not allow a woman as a parliament member. You know, so I think that for me, the sad discovery of the 7th of October were that there are forces in this society, and I'm saying that they're a minority, but they're a big minority, that really holds to racist ideas and thoughts, you know. So in that sense, it was sad to see now with this government how some of the rats feels that it's okay to step out of their holes, and how people allow themselves to express opinions that in the past no one would dare to put out loudly.
Yeah, that's true. Perfect, Edgar. Thank you very much. Toda rabba.
Thank you.
Toda. Eventually, I hope when one day you come to Argentina, travel to Chile to visit us. We have
I'd love to come to Chile. Maybe one day it will work out.
Here, you will be more than welcome.
Thank you.
Edgar, see you soon. Bye.
Bye.